This will soon be a Big Ten rivalry, but let's not rush things. So let's savor what we've got here in 2023 between Washington and Oregon, and wherever they play, whatever conference, in whatever venue. It is one of the great rivalries in college football. Washington, Oregon, and it means a whole lot beyond just the rivalry toward the Pac-12 and the college football playoff. We got Ryan Winter here from SportsStat 503. It's right here on YouTube. Please check it out. Ryan, what's going on today?
Mark, loving life out here on the West Coast.
Nice. Well, this should be a heck of a ball game. There's no question about that. You got to play this one in Seattle. Great environment. And these two teams show some definite similarities, but there are some differences there, of course. And as Oregon approaches this one at 5-0 with 2 wins in the Pac-12, how would you deem this season thus far?
Well, I think it's a success across the board. I mean, I think the whole Pac-12 is getting respect across the board. It's the last year. Maybe they're throwing us a bone one time because they know it's not going to hurt them in the future. But it is just, it's a magical season this year. A lot of guys have come back for this year. Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix, both being some of those guys who are very, very aged quarterbacks. And trying to just get it done and trying to get somebody in the final CFP from the Pac-12. This could be the year. There's a lot of great teams. And like you said, there's rarely is this matchup a top, it's never been a top 10 matchup, but rarely is it even a top 25 matchup. These guys have played each other over 100 years, and most of the time the Huskies are good or the Ducks are good. Rarely are they both good. The last couple of years have treated us to some great matchups, including last year at Autzen Stadium where Washington gets the win, setting up for an absolute magical game in Seattle this Saturday.
Yeah, that was a heck of a ball game. Of course, Bo Nix was hurt late, had to miss a series. That may have been pivotal. We'll never know, but Washington escaped in Eugene. Your thoughts about the Oregon offense, how well it's played, if it's hitting on all cylinders, anything that concerns you?
Yeah, I mean, no, I think the offense is great. This is brand new offensive coordinator, so you didn't really know exactly what you were going to have there. We like excitement out here, right? So you take some chances, you get some opportunities. We were kind of stuck in the Mario Cristobal era with Justin Herbert, a great quarterback, but you didn't really utilize his arm very much. As soon as Coach Dan came out here, Lanning really stressed the idea that they're going to take shots and going to stretch the ball deep. And so you have that really balanced attack at Oregon. You've got a great running game. You always have had a great running game at Oregon. You've been known for good offensive lines. You have a new offensive line for the most part this year because a lot of guys have graduated or moved on from last year. But this is just an absolute great opportunity for the Ducks to show up and really do what they're supposed to do, which is win this game. They've got the great quarterback who's going to put you in the right decisions. They've got a great running game, which obviously quarterbacks love to lean on. And you've got a great offensive line, and the wide receiver room is very deep. The wide receiver room has also been very productive. And so you're right. When you look at these guys, when you break these numbers down or whatever, it's not that much different. Like Penix is the number one passer in the country, but it's not like he's that much more of a passer than Bo Nix. They just throw the ball more at Washington. I do think the big difference in this game is going to be on the defensive side. I think both offenses are going to do what they're supposed to do. I just think whoever gets a couple stops on the defensive side, it might be only 2 or 3 stops that's going to make this game. It was last year. I mean, had Oregon been able to stop them late in the game, they win the game. Had Oregon been able to get a first down, they probably win the game. So, I think it's good. I think it's going to be a really close game, and it's going to be a fantastic showdown.
And so, Ryan, to latch on to your last point there, this Oregon team was a top 10 to 15 team last year that scored all the points, and there were questions on defense. Not questions regarding talent, but it was, the secondary's a bit of a mess and really underachieved and didn't bring its best from week to week, had some injuries as well. And then the pass rush was a bit spotty. And then I think that Colorado result, and to watch the game play out, which was 35-0 at half, forget what the final score was, right. Slap some people across the face to say, maybe Oregon has fixed a lot of deficiencies on that side of the ball, and maybe they have a complete team this year. How much do you take from Colorado, and is that level of play been consistent? I saw the Texas Tech game. That's all I've seen out of Oregon besides that Colorado first half. But how is the defense upgraded?
Yeah, well, I think we all knew this was going to be more of a transition with Dan Lanning coming in, right? Defensive head coach, defensive minded coach, not going to completely come out here and throw the offense away. Oregon's known for its offense and being innovative and being creative and stuff, but the defense had to get better. And you're right. The pass defense was not very good on the back end or the pass rush. So you played a team like Washington, and they picked you apart, threw for over 400 yards against you last year at Autzen. And then 2 weeks later, after your best defensive performance of the year against Utah, you couldn't stop the run against Oregon State. So it was just an enigma last year. You couldn't figure it out. And usually defenses are going to be better in one phase or the other, and they can kind of lean on the one side to try to get them through the other side that they're not as good at. But for whatever reason, the Ducks just couldn't find a way to finish the job last year and finish some of these teams off. And you got to give credit to the other teams as well. I mean, obviously, Washington has a lot to do with that. Oregon State had a lot to do with that win as well. But this is a game where it feels like Oregon's better on defense than they were last year. I think they're better on offense than they were last year. And I think Washington is basically similar. I think they've got a similar type of a defense, similar type of an offense. Their offense is one of the best in the country last year. I mean, how much better can you get if you're already number one? And the problem with them is they don't run the ball that much. When they do run the ball, I feel like they're effective. And, the running game actually might be a real secret of this game. Whoever can run the ball better might be able to win it. But looking at those two games, like you mentioned, Texas Tech, first half of Colorado, I think the Texas Tech game is probably a better test than the Colorado game. Not to try to insult Colorado, but Colorado had come in on there with a lot of hype from their previous games and everything else that was built around that program. But there wasn't really that much there, especially on the offensive defensive line. Now, Shedeur Sanders is a great player. There's some other great players that they have, skill guys, but Oregon really took advantage of that offensive line. And it was just, I mean, they had 7 sacks. I mean, I can't remember a game where they had 7 sacks. So, but the Texas Tech game was tough. The Texas Tech game was a little closer than a lot of Duck fans wanted it to be, and it was a real test. And I don't know how good Texas Tech's going to be down the road. They've had their injury problems and everything else, but when you look at the defense had to improve last year. It looks like it has. And I'm really excited to see. This is the true test. This is the game where we'll see, is this the real defense or not?
Yeah. And so I see the defensive improvement. I see it on the stat sheet, and I see it with my eyeballs watching the games. When you say for two teams that I believe are 1 and 2 in the nation, or at least in the top 3 in yards per play,
right,
and something close to that last year, where Oregon was somewhere in the top 5 to 10, and Washington was, I believe, number 1, as you mentioned. Why do you think the Oregon offense is better than an elite unit last year?
That's a good question. So I think, last year's team and this year's team was kind of interesting. It felt like last year's team, they were still trying to figure out how to utilize Bo the right way. He came in as such a good running quarterback that they were going to want to run him more. I'll give you just as an example, right? Last year, they used to run Bo in the option, where they would run him down the line and he would pitch like a classic option. This year, he's just sweeping it and throwing it out, and they're just they maybe have a tight end come and block for the running back. But the same action's kind of there, the same blocking scheme's kind of there, but the option's not really there. Now, he might have a fake pitch, throw over the top, kind of an RPO option, but the ideology is last year, they were really utilizing him as a runner. I feel like this year they're keeping him in the pocket. They want him to throw the ball. So the wide receivers, I feel like, have gotten more passes to them. They're not utilizing the running game as much as they used to lean on it a little bit more last year. And I just think it's a more exciting offense. I think Will Stein's offense is really exciting. So the guys are playing at a high level. They've had some problems with penalties. That's been the biggest detriment for the Ducks so far this year, is they put themselves behind the sticks sometimes. They've taken away some big plays. There's been some plays missed, some long balls missed, but at least they're taking some chances. And when they take those chances, they're open. But, Washington, nobody pushes it down the field more than Washington. Washington is going to, everybody talks about extending sideline to sideline. Washington extends end zone to end zone. They are going to take some shots over the top. So it's really about that Oregon defense, that Oregon defense is going to be able to hold on to this sort of a game. And I think that the improvements on the Oregon offensive side has helped the Oregon defensive side in all their practices and everything else.
Of course, Washington a couple of weeks ago showed that they are human. They went to the desert and came home with a 7-point win over an Arizona team that I don't know a lot of people gave too much credit to, but then Arizona turns around and takes USC to overtime. So maybe that Washington effort wasn't as much about them not showing up for that game as it was that the Wildcats might be a little bit better than we thought. But what characteristics can you put on this rivalry that are going to give it a little bit of a distinction for people that aren't familiar with anything besides flipping ABC on at 12:30 local time or 3:30 Eastern to watch a football game?
Well, the thing that's so unique about us is we're just so remote. I mean, we are out on the edge of the continent. And, I read an article, somebody said to get to Husky Stadium, you have to take a plane over mountains and then get on a boat. And I thought that was hilarious. But we're very remote. We're tucked over here in the very northwest corner of the country. We don't have the population center that the rest of the country has. We're not even connected even closely to the population center. Our NBA team, Portland Trailblazers, travels more than anybody else in the NBA. Oregon and Washington are probably going to be the most traveled team in the country next year, going into the Big Ten. And it's like, or maybe it's USC or UCLA because they got to go from south. But my point being is that our rivalry is unique. Historically, this game has always meant a lot, but it's not been the number one rivalry. The number one rivalry has always been the in-state rivalry, and Oregon and Oregon State have always been for 100 years so linked. We're within 40 miles of the campuses are within 40 miles of each other, and they represent somewhat different groups of the state, different socioeconomic levels, different interests. And it's a great rivalry, right? But the Oregon-Washington rivalry is actually two similar type schools, right? Oregon State and Washington State are the two ag schools, and Oregon and Washington are the two business and law schools. So it's really interesting when these guys come together because Washington is definitely the elite. They're the bigger city. They're the wealthier school. They're the wealthier group, and then they took real offense at the fact that Oregon came up. The fact that Oregon came up with the Phil Knight money and everything else, all the other boosters that came in the 90s and 2000s. And so Washington has that real old money, new money kind of bias against the Ducks. There's some real hatred in this rivalry. It's a great rivalry like the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry because it's state to state rather than in-house. It does something different. Now, the fact that this is the last one of the last one of the Pac-12 before you go to the Big Ten is something magical as well. I think it's going to be the best game of the entire season. Obviously, the USC game's right around the corner next month, and that could be telling as well. But this to me means more than any of it right now. And the Washington game is important to me personally because my grandparents met at it. 1945, coming off the war. My grandfather was in the uniform. My grandmother was up with the sorority sisters. They're both Ducks. They're in Washington and Seattle. The Ducks are playing. They meet at the hotel. So my family kind of starts, in essence, at an Oregon-Washington game. And I'm 45. I live in Portland. I've been to probably 15, 20 of these in my lifetime up in Seattle. I don't miss this game. And it's important to me personally, and it's obviously important to me as a Duck fan.
Now that hits home. When grandparents met around this football game. Wow, that really transcends sports right there. The iteration of this, what you just laid out, minus the family, but what you just laid out in regards to the Pac-12 implications and historically, that this is one of the great rivalries in the conference. The conference will be no more. Right. It does continue next year, but in a different way, in a different conference, and it will no longer be in the Pac-12. We just saw that, a different iteration of that with Texas and Oklahoma last week, playing a final Big 12 rivalry, moving on to another conference. The difference is that there will no longer be a Pac-12, which I got to think is, again, there's a sweetness to being able to survive this realignment craziness and zaniness, to be able to continue to be among the power brokers of the sport in the Big Ten, but a bitter portion of it that it's just never going to be quite the same.
Yeah. Well, right now it feels about 80-20 negative to positive. The positive is there. We're but we're in it, right? We're on the farewell tour right now. I mean, we just played Stanford for the last time.
Yeah.
Oregon State just played Cal for the last time. I mean, these are some of the original Pac-8 members. I mean, we actually kind of started the conference 100 years ago. I mean, it is a shame. We've beat this horse over and over and over. It is what it is. And no, you're right. I think there is a silver lining to the whole thing for Duck fans personally, that it's going to be all right. It's going to be all good, but it is going to be difficult. And I think it's a lot worse actually for us, Oregon and Washington specifically, if Oregon State and Washington State don't find a landing home. If they don't find a space, we are going to hear about this for a long time until the big shakeup that we all kind of think might be coming in the future, where there might be some sort of new conference realignment or some sort of exodus from the NCAA, or I don't know what happens in the future, but we kind of think something bigger is going to happen right down the road. And it would be just an absolute shame to lose those two schools. Now, this week, all we care about is Oregon and Washington. We don't really care about Washington State and Oregon State, but it is part of the narrative of this year that is a very bitter pill to swallow, to see all these teams come together for the very last time.
Absolutely. And we got an unveiling last week of the 2024 Big Ten schedule. And of course, we've got a full off season to discuss that and your thoughts there.
Well, Mark, I just love an organized conference that can have a plan. We're coming from the Pac-12 where we didn't know what we were doing next year.
Yeah, things will be different.
Most definitely.
In a number of ways. Absolutely. Ryan Winter, Sports Chat 503. It's right here on YouTube. It's easy to find, Sports Chat 503. And Ryan, we appreciate you being here as always.
Yeah, man, I love it. I'll be there. My son will be taking pictures on the field, so I'll be getting some great shots there. Shameless plug, Darby Winter Photo, if you want to check him out. He's a press pass guy, so he's got all that sort of stuff. But no, this is a game that everybody has looked forward to. As Duck fans, we look forward to this as soon as the ball dropped on our season last year with the Husky game. As soon as that thing was over, hit zeros, I was like, oh man, Seattle next year is going to be insane. And now here it is. So tremendous time. Thank you so much for what you do for college football, Mark. You're the absolute best. Appreciate you.
People ignore my banner. Sports Chat 503. Sports Chat 503. I'm a knucklehead. Ryan's the best. We appreciate him. Ryan, we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Mark. You're the best.